Welcome to the Formula Bone F1 Show's 2022 Hungarian Grand Prix-view. I'm Jared Borislow, but you can call me J-Bone. Let's get into it, folks. J-Bone! Our first order of business today is getting to know the Hungarian Grand Prix and its circuit, the Hungaroring. The Hungarian Grand Prix was first run as a Formula One World Championship event back in 1986. This race, the 1986 Hungarian Grand Prix, was the first Formula One race to take place behind the Iron Curtain, which is the name given to the Soviet-influenced eastern half of Europe between the end of World War II in 1945 and the end of the Cold War in 1991. The race was, unfortunately, won by Nelson Piquet after a great battle with Ayrton Senna. And this race held the record for the most attended Formula One Grand Prix ever, with 200,000 spectators in attendance, until it was eventually beaten by the 1995 Australian Grand Prix in Adelaide, which recorded 210,000 spectators. For reference, by the way, the current record for the most attended Grand Prix, and by the way, this is just the race, not the full race weekend, the current record is 250,000 spectators and is held by the 2000 United States Grand Prix, which was held at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, a venue that I really hope Formula One returns to someday. Please. It would be so cool. So cool. Because the 1986 Hungarian Grand Prix was such a smashing success, smashing baby, minus having a cool winner, of course, it was added to the Formula One calendar permanently. It has remained there ever since, running uninterrupted through the present day. Never taken a year off. No years off for the Hungarian Grand Prix. And as far as what the future holds for the Hungarian Grand Prix, it is currently under contract with Formula One to be held until 2027. Now here are a few Hungarian Grand Prix facts. Fact 1, Lewis Hamilton has won the Hungarian Grand Prix a record 8 times. This puts Lewis in a three-way tie for a driver with the most wins at the same Grand Prix in Formula One history. The other two drivers are Michael Schumacher, who won 8 French Grand Prix, and the man himself, Lewis Hamilton, who has won 8 British Grand Prix. By the way, Lewis is truly the home Grand Prix king. Winning your home Grand Prix 8 times is insane. That's got to feel so good. There have been 771 Formula One drivers ever, and Lewis has won his home Grand Prix more times in his career thus far than 732 of those 771 drivers have won all Grand Prix combined. Truly insane. Fact 2. The first ever Hungarian Grand Prix was held all the way back in 1936, and it was also the only Hungarian Grand Prix ever held until the Formula One Hungarian Grand Prix came into existence in 1986. This 50-year gap between Hungarian Grand Prix was a result of World War II and the ensuing Cold War. And fact 3, the circuit layout that was used for the first 3 Formula One Hungarian Grand Prix was not the originally designed circuit layout, despite the Hungaroring being purpose-built to host the F1 Hungarian Grand Prix. This weird situation is because during the circuit's construction to hold the first F1 Hungarian Grand Prix, a natural spring was discovered directly underneath where the racetrack was to be laid on the straight between the turns 3 and 4. So a temporary chicane was installed that went around this natural spring until the spring was culverted 3 years later, eventually turning the Hungaroring into its originally designed layout, even though the first 3 Hungarian Grand Prix were not raced on that layout. Now, onto the circuit itself. The Hungaroring in Magyarország, Hungary, I definitely said that wrong, I'm sorry, is 4.381 kilometers or 2.72 miles in length, and the Hungarian Grand Prix will be contested over the course of 70 laps around its 14 turns. The Hungaroring is an interesting challenge for drivers because it's one of the highest downforce circuits in all of Formula One, and consequently, because more downforce equals less top speed, The Hungaroring is also one of the slowest circuits in Formula One. Drivers only go full throttle for 50% of their laps at the downforce-focused Hungaroring. Compare that to a power track like Jeddah Corniche circuit, where drivers go full throttle for 79% of their laps. When all that's paired with the fact that it's a pretty narrow circuit, it's no wonder the Hungaroring is known as a difficult circuit at which to overtake, so pole position in Hungary has some definitive additional value, much like it does in Monaco. And just to be clear, I said the Hungaroring is an interesting challenge for drivers, not a guaranteed interesting race for fans. There have definitely been some boring races there, but there have certainly been some highly entertaining races at the Hungaroring. You need look no further than last year's race, which is one of the most entertaining Formula One races ever. It was so good, might still be my favorite race I've ever watched, and it featured everything from a massive Turn 1 demolition derby to Lewis Hamilton restarting the Grand Prix alone on the grid after said demolition derby, to Lewis Hamilton looking like he would pull off a last-to-first victory, to Fernando Alonso defending Lewis so that his teammate Esteban Ocon could achieve his first ever Grand Prix victory. And I should note, it was the wet conditions that caused last year's chaos, and it's looking like this weekend in Hungary will also be wet. Just saying. Chaos potentially on the radar. For tire compounds at the 2022 Hungarian Grand Prix, Pirelli have opted for the neutral compound range for the second race in a row, the C2 hards, C3 mediums, and C4 softs. Pirelli Motorsport Director Mario Isola had this to say about their choice. Quote, "In the past, the Hungaroring has been known as a place where it's difficult to overtake, but the new package of cars and tires this year helps drivers get much closer to each other, which is why we have seen some great races with plenty of overtaking so far this season. Hopefully, that's going to be the case at the Hungaroring as well, a tight and twisty track where the cars are often grouped together. Hungary is also known for being very hot, but it's also rained for the last 2 years there, so the moral of the story is never to jump to conclusions. We've seen some surprises at the Hungaroring before, and that could be the case even more this year." End quote. I sure hope so, Mario. I sure hope so. No one has a business like yours with all its strengths and challenges. To succeed, you need a hiring partner that adapts to your needs. You need this episode's sponsor, Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed's a powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. Find great talent faster through time-saving tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. With Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment that they sponsor a job, according to Indeed Data US. One of the things that I love about Indeed, and one of the reasons we'll be using it for our next hire here at Bolen Media, is that it makes hiring all in one place so easy because they have such an amazing talent pool. In fact, 3 out of 4 US online job seekers search for jobs on Indeed each month, according to ComScore. Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/FBone. Offer good for a limited time. This is an amazing deal because when you sponsor an Indeed post in the US, you're 3 times more likely to get a hire, according to Indeed data. So claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/FBone. That's Indeed.com/FBONE. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And there's a link for that deal in the description of this episode. Next up, here are your storylines to follow for the 2022 Hungarian Grand Prix. The first storyline, will Lewis Hamilton become the first driver to ever record 9 wins at the same Grand Prix? Like I mentioned earlier, Lewis has won the Hungarian Grand Prix 8 times. No driver has ever won one Grand Prix on 9 different occasions, and it's within the realm of possibility that Lewis makes that happen this weekend. Top speed is one of Mercedes' biggest weaknesses, and given the Hungaroring status as one of the slowest circuits on the calendar, with just 50% of a lap there taken full throttle, I think Lewis has a better chance of winning a race at the Hungaroring than he does at most other circuits. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but imagine if it does, folks. Just imagine. The second storyline, does the Hungaroring better suit Red Bull or Ferrari? I'm leaning towards the Hungaroring favoring Ferrari because, one, it's only a 50% full throttle circuit and is more windy than straight. This makes Red Bull's straight line speed advantage less of an advantage, which should benefit the Scuderia, whose car also corners better than Red Bull's. And two, the Hungaroring is a hard circuit at which to overtake due to its narrowness and windiness, which benefits cars that perform better in qualifying, and the Ferrari is undoubtedly the best qualifier on the grid this season. The third storyline, Haas are finally bringing an upgrade package to the Hungarian Grand Prix. Haas delusion syndrome sufferers, our time has finally arrived. Haas are introducing their first major upgrades package of 2022 to Kevin Magnussen's car this weekend at the Hungarian Grand Prix. Our king, Günther Steiner, had this to say about this glorious, glorious occasion. Quote, "As many people know, we waited a bit longer to bring our upgrade to track because I think we still have good pace. Now, what we want to do is put performance on. What exactly it will do, I don't want to say because I don't want to jinx it, but we know what it should be doing from our development. We'll just have to wait and see what we can get out of the package." End quote. You know that your team principal is a keeper when he incorporates an anti-jinxing stance into his media strategy. What a guy, that Günther. I cannot wait to see how K-Mag does this weekend. No Haas delusion syndrome. Just vibes. The final storyline. What will the World Drivers' Championship and World Constructors' Championship title fights look like going into the F1 summer break? The Hungarian Grand Prix is the final race before the F1 summer break, which means there will be no F1 sessions for about a month, from after the Hungarian Grand Prix on July 31st until FP1 of the Belgian Grand Prix on August 26th. Now, that being said, here are some mathematically possible ways we could be entering the F1 summer break after the Hungarian Grand Prix. First, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz could be tied on World Drivers' Championship points entering the F1 summer break. This will happen if Sainz wins the Hungarian Grand Prix with the fastest lap and Leclerc DNFs, which is not out of the realm of possibility given how both drivers performed in France. Second, Red Bull could be solo 1-2 in the World Drivers' Championship standings once again, entering the F1 summer break. Checo just needs to score 8 more points than Leclerc in Hungary for this to happen. Very possible. Third, George Russell could be solo third in the World Drivers' Championship standings, entering the F1 summer break. Yes, you heard that right. In order for this to happen, George needs to outscore Sainz by 2 points and Checo by 21 points. And finally, Mercedes could be solo second in the World Constructors' Championship entering the F1 summer break. Yes, you heard that right. They need to outscore Ferrari by 44 points in order to do so. And if they can pull that off, the Ferrari memes will be all time. Kind of hope it happens just for the memes. Real quick, before we keep going, if you're enjoying the Formula Bone F1 show and want to help me grow the show as well as be notified whenever I release new Formula 1 content, I'd really appreciate it if you could take 10 seconds right now, just 10 seconds, folks, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, then ring that notification bell to turn on all Formula Bone notifications. I'm also trying to get 1,500 likes on this video episode if you're able to help me out with that as well. Thank you all so much for the support. It means the world to me. J-Bone! Next up, here are my 3 bona fide race predictions for the 2022 Hungarian Grand Prix that I'm about to go 3 for 3 on. Bona fide prediction number 1, Charles Leclerc will win the Hungarian Grand Prix. Pole position is very important at the Hungaroring because it's a narrow circuit without many overtaking opportunities. Leclerc has undoubtedly been the best qualifier on the grid this season, and because the Hungaroring is only a 50% full throttle circuit, Red Bull's straight line speed advantage will be less of a factor in qualifying, so I think Leclerc takes pole position, and if he does, it'll be quite hard for anyone to overtake him, especially if it is a wet Grand Prix like it looks like it might be, in which case it'll be even harder for anyone to overtake Leclerc because breaking off the racing line will be even more difficult. Bonafide prediction number 2. Lewis Hamilton will finish on the podium at the Hungarian Grand Prix. This circuit being way less focused on top speed than most should benefit Mercedes, whose strong suit is definitely not their top speed. Also, Lewis is going to feel pretty comfortable at the Hungaroring considering he has won there an insane 8 times. Combined, I think those 2 factors should see Lewis podium in his 5th consecutive Grand Prix. And bonafide prediction number 3, Kevin Magnussen will not finish in the points at the Hungarian Grand Prix in the upgraded Haas car. Stay with me here, folks. Haas team principal Gunther Steiner won't say how good he thinks Haas's upgrades to Kevin Magnussen's car will be in Hungary because he doesn't want to jinx it. So I'm going to help Gunther out here by hopefully reverse jinxing K-Mag into the points by saying he won't finish in the points. J-Bone! Those were J-Bone's bonafide race predictions. Now, I want to hear your bonafide race predictions. Let me see them in the YouTube comment section of this episode, or you can tweet them at me at Formula Bone. Finally here today, I'm going to now give my bonafide pre-race weekend predictions for the top 5 finishers in Sunday's Hungarian Grand Prix with zero reasoning or explanation. P5, Checo Perez. P4, Max Verstappen. P3, Lewis Hamilton. P2, Carlos Sainz. And P1, Charles Leclerc. That's it for today's episode of the Formula Bone F1 show. If you enjoyed the show and want to help me out, I would really appreciate it if you could toss me a comment, like, subscription, rating, review, or any other form of engagement on whatever platform you're on right now so that said platform and its algorithm like J-Bone more. I respond to a lot of YouTube comments, so leave one and I might respond to it. Speaking of YouTube, if you join the Noti Gang by ringing that bell and turning on all Formula Bone YouTube notifications, I'd really appreciate it, folks. For Formula One updates between now and my Hungarian Grand Prix recap episode, you can join over 500 members of the Bone Brigade in the Formula Bone Discord server via the invite link in the description of this episode. And you can also follow me on all social media at Formula Bone and at my real name, Jared Borislow. That's at JaredBorislow. Until next time, folks, J-Bone!